Well, tonight, the Fox 8 News I-Team uncovers extraordinary details concerning an election scandal in Cuyahoga County.
Well, in his first extensive interview, a special prosecutor reveals the recount for the 2004 vote for president may well have been a sham. Tonight, Fox 8 I-Team reporter Bill Shield breaking the story. Bill?
Bill Stacy, first, according to the special prosecutor, there's no evidence the alleged manipulation changed the outcome of the presidential race. As for other races, more on that in a moment. People's votes were not changed on their ballots, but rather the prosecutor says the process of recounting the votes was manipulated to make sure that recount did not find any major problems. Why? The prosecutor says election workers may have wanted to avoid the possibility of having to spend more time and do more work. In 2004, it all came down to Ohio. On election eve in Cleveland, Bruce Springsteen sang for Democrat John Kerry, who promised change.
And invest in you, in America, in the middle class.
But on election day, George Bush narrowly carried the state and won his second term.
I, George Walker Bush.
In the weeks after the polls closed, the small Green Party put up the approximately $14,000 needed to force a recount of the vote here in Cuyahoga County. The I-Team has now learned that set off a series of events that has led a special prosecutor to conclude the recount was rigged.
Days before that, the ballot department of the Board of Elections had unsealed the ballots in secret and actually conducted their own recount.
3 county election officials, Kathy Dreamer, Rosie Greer, and Jacqueline Maiden, have now been indicted, charged with violating election laws. All ultimately report to Michael Vu, the director of the Elections Board.
I think the issue here that the county prosecutor Baxter has is whether or not we manipulated the ballots, and from my understanding, there was no manipulation of the ballots.
This was a willful, this was a calculated process that I think lasted for days.
To manipulate the recount.
Correct.
Michael Vu points out that elections officials are not accused of trying to physically change anyone's vote. As for whether some of his staff members held an illegal secret recount, you're telling me that didn't happen.
Well, I can't tell you whether it's happened or didn't happen. What I'm trying to say is from my understanding, it did not happen.
Number 6.
This is video from the official recount. The law provides that 3% of the county's votes must be recounted. If they match the official count, the process is over. But if there were problems, Cuyahoga County would have had to recount all the ballots, over 600,000, by hand, much as counties here in Florida had to do after the 2000 presidential race. That recount was long, expensive, embarrassing to the counties involved, and held the presidency in the balance.
If we lose, it's okay if the system's fair. In this case, it's pretty clear the system wasn't fair.
Attorney Richard Kerger's letter to Cuyahoga County Prosecutor Bill Mason about problems in the recount led to the appointment of Kevin Baxter as special prosecutor. Kerger says recount observers had noticed something strange about the ballots.
Before they were recounted, there would be long strings, 100, 200 of the ballots cast for one candidate, Kerry. The next 100 would be ballots cast for Bush, and that's not the way people vote.
Prosecutor Baxter alleges that election officials held a secret recount, unsealing ballots and discarding precincts that wouldn't match the official count. So he contends this recount you're looking at was a sham. Election officials had rigged it to ensure the people doing the counting wouldn't find any major problems.
When they show up on recount day, they did not realize that this other process, secret process, already occurred, perhaps even making what they were doing meaningless.
So what did election officials do with the ballots before this recount? Depends on who you talk to.
My understanding is they never touched the ballots in the sense that they did any pre-counting or anything else, you know.
Bob Bennett is chairman of both the State Republican Party and the Cuyahoga County Elections Board. If they were opened and pre-sorted, you would disagree with that process?
I don't know whether they were, whether I disagree with that process or not, because I don't know that that was ever done.
We then told Bennett the special prosecutor had concluded employees had unsealed the ballots and conducted a secret recount.
If they did that, it's up to the jury as to why they did that.
Baxter says there's no evidence that what he alleges changed the outcome of the presidential race in Ohio. But
what's concerning is there's some evidence that this process may have been going on for a number of years. And I would suggest if you look back that there's probably local races that may have been very close, that there could have been a difference made.
So have candidates in Cuyahoga County won elections they should have lost? And what about close school levies? And what about just simple fairness? Now a jury will decide if this recount supervised by the Board of Elections was fair, if it belonged anywhere near an American election.
This is one of the foundations of the democratic and electoral process, that the integrity of this process needs to be preserved.
Again, Prosecutor Baxter says there's no evidence the alleged manipulation changed the outcome of the presidential race in Ohio. All three of the indicted officials are still working. Bob Bennett says they were given the option of working or being out on paid leave, and all chose to return to work. Prosecutor Baxter says it concerns him that indicted officials are working with people who may be witnesses against them in the trial, which is now set for early May.
Bill, you touched on this, but could the outcome have affected any of the close races here?
It is possible, Stacy, if the practice has been to pre-sort ballots and put aside precincts that might reveal problems. Election officials say they've had the same procedures for 23 years. Those procedures do not call for any pre-sorting of ballots. Whether in practice elections workers routinely pre-sorted ballots is still unclear. But late today we received a letter from defendant Rosie Greer's attorney. Dominic Vinantonio says his client is a victim of a sometimes blind political justice system. He says Greer, a longtime public servant, followed the rules but didn't make them, and that this recount was conducted in the same manner as every other recount she's participated in over the last 6 years. Elections Director Vu says it's highly unlikely the outcomes of any races would have been affected. There were 171 recounts in the county between 1990 and 2004. If you know of a race where you think the recount may have been questionable, or if you have another story for us, contact the I-Team. There's our hotline, 216-432-4228, or you can email us at fox8cleveland.com and click on I-Team.
Thank you, Bill. Sure. Very much.